My name is Monica Hale. I was 32 years old when I learned that generosity, when left unguarded, can quietly turn into an invitation for exploitation. 4 years earlier, I had finally made it. At least that's what people like to say once the struggle is no longer visible. For 7 years, I had built my boutique marketing agency from nothing. I'd left a stable corporate job with benefits and predictability for freelance contracts, unpaid invoices, and nights where dinner meant ramen noodles eaten straight from the pot. There were months I questioned everything: my talent, my judgment, my stubborn belief that betting on myself wasn't a mistake. What people never see is the loneliness of those years, the isolation, the quiet panic that settles in at 2 a.m. when you're staring at your laptop, wondering if this is the month everything collapses. The breakthrough came suddenly. A few small business social media campaigns went viral. Algorithms shifted in my favor. Word spread. Within months, I had a waiting list 3 months long. The kind of success that feels unreal when you've spent so long bracing for failure. And through all of it, through every anxious night and uncertain morning, there was one person who never doubted me: my younger sister, Vanessa. When I'd hit rock bottom, she hadn't asked questions. She hadn't offered advice I didn't ask for. She'd simply opened her door. "You can stay in the spare bedroom as long as you need," she'd said, handing me a towel like it was nothing. "I believe in you, Mon. You're going to make it." For 8 months, I lived in that tiny bedroom in her Tampa apartment. Vanessa and her husband, Brandon, put up with my irregular hours, my pacing phone calls, my constant stress. I worked late, woke early, and talked about algorithms like they were life or death matters. They never complained, not once. So when my business finally took off, I knew exactly how I wanted to thank them. I booked a 5-night stay at Emerald Coast Resort in Destin, Florida, an all-inclusive luxury property perched along the Gulf of Mexico. White sand beaches, private cabanas, personal concierges, the kind of place where the staff-to-guest ratio makes you feel important simply for existing. When we arrived, Vanessa's breath caught. "This is insane," she whispered, eyes wide as the valet took our bags from my new Lexus. "Monica, you didn't have to do this." "You're the reason I'm not still bartending at Applebee's," I laughed, squeezing her hand. "Consider it interest on rent." Brandon let out a low whistle when we saw our adjoining ocean view suites on the 8th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows, balconies overlooking emerald water. My room had a California king bed with sheets that felt like clouds and a rainfall shower bigger than my first studio apartment. It felt good, not just the luxury, but the giving. Our personal concierge, Savannah, showed us around the property with effortless polish. "The signature restaurants require reservations," she explained, gesturing toward a glass-walled structure hovering over the water. "But everything is included in your premium package, Miss Hale." That first evening, we had dinner at the beachfront steakhouse. The sun melted into the horizon in shades of pink and gold as champagne glasses clinked. "To Monica," Brandon toasted, genuine admiration in his eyes. The best sister-in-law anyone could ask for. I felt proud, grateful, whole, until I noticed Vanessa slip away from the table. Her phone was pressed to her ear, her voice hushed but urgent. Her free hand moved animatedly as she spoke. When she returned, her smile was tight, carefully arranged. "Just checking on our neighbor," she said quickly. "She's feeding Mr. Whiskers." She didn't quite meet my eyes. I told myself I was imagining things. That night, the sound of waves lulled me toward sleep, until a sharp knock jolted me awake. The digital clock read 11:52 p.m. Still disoriented, I opened the door. Standing in the hallway were an older couple I recognized instantly from Vanessa's wedding photos. Gerald and Patricia, Brandon's parents. They stood between 2 small duffel bags, barely enough for a weekend. "Surprise," Patricia beamed, arms wide, already stepping forward. What are you doing here?" I asked. "Vanessa told us all about this incredible vacation," Gerald said, already walking past me into my room. "We had time off saved and thought, why not?" Before I could respond, Vanessa and Brandon appeared behind them. "Isn't this wonderful?" Vanessa said brightly. Her smile still didn't reach her eyes. Something in my stomach tightened, and I didn't yet know why. I told myself to breathe. That first night, after Gerald and Patricia finally settled, uninvited, into the adjoining suite, I stood alone on my balcony and listened to the ocean. I tried to let the sound steady me, tried to convince myself this was a harmless misunderstanding. Families overlap, boundaries blur. That's what happens when people love each other. But love, I would soon learn, has a sound. And it doesn't laugh behind your back. The next morning, sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, bright and optimistic, like it was daring me to enjoy the day. I showered, dressed, and met everyone at the breakfast buffet. The spread was indulgent: seafood omelets, fresh pastries, smoked salmon laid out like jewelry. Gerald went first. "I'll have the lobster omelet," he told the server, scanning the options. "And premium mimosas. Make it 2. He glanced at me, smiling easily. "Put it on Monica's tab." My fork froze midair. "Actually," I began. "Nonsense," Patricia cut in smoothly, patting my hand as if I were a child. "Monica is so generous. That's what we adore about her." She turned back to the server. "I'll have the lobster Benedict extra hollandaise and a side of smoked salmon." Vanessa kept her eyes on her plate. Brandon stared straight ahead. I swallowed the discomfort along with my coffee. Throughout the day, Gerald and Patricia behaved as if the resort had been waiting specifically for them. They booked a couple's massage at the spa, reserved spots on a private dolphin-watching cruise, ordered cocktails with names I couldn't pronounce from every bar we passed. When Patricia wandered into a boutique near the pool and began selecting designer cover-ups and swimwear, she waved off the attendant's hesitation. "Our luggage was delayed at the airport," she explained breezily. "Just charge it to room 847. My room. By late afternoon, a knot had formed beneath my ribs, tight, persistent. Every instinct told me something was wrong, but years of conditioning whispered that speaking up would make me look selfish, ungrateful, dramatic. That night, while Vanessa and her in-laws attended a complimentary wine tasting, I checked the resort's app on my phone. My stomach dropped. Over $200 in charges. In a single day. I pulled Brandon aside near the pool, away from the others. "This is getting out of hand," I said quietly. "They're charging everything to my room without asking." He rubbed the back of his neck, eyes darting toward the bar where his parents laughed. "They've had a rough year," he said. "Dad's hardware store isn't doing great. Medical bills, you know how it is." "That doesn't make it okay," I replied. "They showed up uninvited, and now they're spending my money like it's theirs." "They're family," Brandon said simply, as if that explained everything. "And Vanessa said you wouldn't mind." The words landed heavier than the charges. Later that evening, I needed air. The resort glowed softly under the stars, torches flickering along the paths. I ordered a mojito at the pool bar and wandered toward the infinity edge, hoping the night breeze would clear my head. That's when I heard them. Vanessa's voice carried easily across the quiet deck. "I told you it would work," she said, laughter in her tone. "Monica's rolling in money now, and she's too sweet to say no. She always has been." Gerald laughed, a deep, satisfied sound. "Why pay for a beach vacation when your sister-in-law will foot the bill?" "This place is way nicer than anything we could afford," Patricia added. "Just keep acting grateful." Brandon chuckled. "She was completely shocked when you showed up, but she's too nice to make a scene." I stood frozen in the shadows, my drink forgotten, heart pounding so loudly I was sure they could hear it. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a plan. My sister, my confidant, my cheerleader had orchestrated it. I backed away silently, my body moving on instinct, and returned to my room. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the moonlight dancing on the Gulf waters, trying to reconcile the woman I thought Vanessa was with the one who had just laughed about exploiting me. My phone buzzed. "Vanessa, having the best time. Thank you again for everything, sis. You're amazing." I didn't sleep. By sunrise, the horizon glowed pale pink, and my decision had solidified into something cold and steady. I found Vanessa alone on the beach while the others attended morning yoga. "Did you plan this?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "Did you tell them to come here without money?" Her face flushed. She looked away, tracing patterns in the sand with her toe. "They've been struggling," she said. "I thought you'd understand." "You volunteered my money without asking me," I snapped. "They came with empty bags and no intention of paying. You set me up." "They're family," she insisted. "We help family." "I helped you," I replied, my voice breaking. "I never manipulated you." As I walked away, Savannah, the concierge, approached me. "Miss Hale," she said gently, "may I have a word?" In the manager's office, Thomas showed me a tablet with my account details. "Nearly $6,000 in 4 days," he said carefully, including a private yacht charter scheduled for tomorrow. My head spun. "There's more," he added. "Yesterday, someone requested duplicate keycards to your room. This morning, housekeeping reported an attempt to access your room safe." Ice flooded my veins. "They tried to get into my safe?" "The attempt failed," Thomas assured me, "but we wanted you to know. They hadn't just been using my generosity. They'd been testing how far it went. What are my options? I asked. You can remove authorization for charges to your account, Thomas explained. Any further expenses would require their own payment method. Do it, I said. That night at dinner, Gerald ordered an expensive bottle of wine. The server hesitated. I'm sorry, sir, she said politely. Each guest now needs their own payment method. 4 pairs of eyes turned to me. I took a sip of water and said nothing. For the first time since this trip began, I felt something shift. Power. And I knew exactly what I needed to do next. The silence at the dinner table lingered long after the server walked away. Gerald's face darkened as he stared down at the menu, his fingers tightening around the leather edges. Patricia's smile collapsed into something thin and brittle. Vanessa looked like she might be sick. Brandon cleared his throat, then closed his mouth again, thinking better of whatever he'd been about to say. I ate quietly. Every bite tasted like cardboard, but I forced myself to chew, to swallow, to remain composed. For years, silence had been my default response to discomfort. Keep the peace. Don't make things awkward. Don't be the problem. That instinct had cost me nearly $6,000. After dinner, Brandon finally caught up with me in the hallway outside the elevators. Monica, he said, lowering his voice, you embarrassed my parents back there. I stopped walking. They embarrassed themselves, I replied calmly. They've been charging thousands of dollars to my account without permission. They didn't think you'd mind. That's the problem, I said. Everyone keeps deciding what I'll tolerate instead of asking me. He sighed, frustrated. You're doing really well now. This isn't going to hurt you. The words stung more than I expected. It wasn't about the money. It never had been. It was about the quiet assumption that my success made me endlessly available, that my boundaries dissolved the moment my bank balance grew. Back in my room, I locked the door and leaned against it, heart racing. I checked my safe, passport, credit cards, emergency cash. Everything was still there, but the violation lingered. Someone had tried to access it. I packed slowly, methodically, folding clothes with care. Each item into the suitcase felt like reclaiming a small piece of myself. When the bag was zipped and standing by the door, I sat on the bed and stared at it for a long time. Leaving felt drastic. Staying felt worse. The next morning, I met Thomas at the front desk before dawn. The lobby was quiet, bathed in soft amber light. I've separated your legitimate charges from the unauthorized ones, he said, sliding a folder across the counter. The difference is substantial. I handed over my card without hesitation. What will happen to them? I asked. They'll need to provide valid payment for all outstanding charges, Thomas replied. If they can't, they'll have to depart immediately. I nodded. Outside, the valet had my car ready. As I pulled away, I didn't look back. 3 hours later, at a small bed and breakfast in Seaside, I finally turned my phone back on. It exploded. Missed calls, texts, voicemails piling on top of each other. Vanessa, where are you? We knocked on your door. Brandon, this isn't funny. Your car is gone. Vanessa, the resort says you removed payment authorization. Brandon, they're asking for a credit card now. I put the phone face down and stepped onto the wraparound porch. The beach below was quiet, untouched by drama. Families strolled. Joggers passed. Life went on. When curiosity finally got the better of me, I scrolled. Brandon, they're threatening to call security. Vanessa, you can't do this to my parents. Brandon, they don't have enough credit to cover everything. Vanessa, this is cruel, Monica. Cruel. Not manipulative, not deceitful, not entitled. Cruel. I blocked their numbers and ordered lunch. A simple sandwich never tasted so satisfying. That afternoon, I walked along the shoreline, breathing deeply, letting the salt air clear the last of the resort's weight from my chest. An elderly woman selling handmade shell bracelets smiled at me. You look like someone who just put something heavy down, she said. I did, I admitted. She nodded knowingly. Keep it that way. That night, as the sun dipped low, I unblocked Vanessa's number long enough to send one message. You had days to apologize. Instead, you blamed me for not letting myself be used. Don't contact me again until you're ready to be honest about what happened. I blocked her again before she could respond. The horizon burned gold and purple. I watched until the last light faded, feeling something unfamiliar settle in my chest. Peace. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty for choosing myself. The quiet that followed my departure should have felt like relief. Instead, it felt like standing in the aftermath of an explosion. Ears ringing, nerves exposed, adrenaline refusing to settle. I slept poorly that night at the bed and breakfast, waking every few hours with fragments of conversations looping in my head. Vanessa's laugh by the pool, Gerald's smug confidence, Patricia's casual entitlement. By morning, the messages started again. I hadn't blocked Brandon's work number. Brandon, we're at the front desk right now. Brandon, security is here. Brandon. My parents are humiliated. I stared at the screen, then set the phone down without responding. Humiliation was hearing people joke about how easily you could be used. Humiliation was realizing your generosity had become entertainment. Around mid-morning, curiosity, mixed with a need for closure, pulled me back to the phone. I unblocked Vanessa's number. It rang twice before she answered. "Where are you?" she demanded immediately. Her voice was sharp, frantic. "Do you have any idea what's happening here?" "Yes," I said evenly. I do. "You left us," she snapped. "You just disappeared. Do you know how that looks?" I let out a slow breath. "Vanessa, I heard you. At the pool. I heard everything." Silence stretched between us. "Heard what?" she asked too quickly. "I heard you laughing about how sweet I am," I said. "About how I wouldn't say no. About how this was all planned." Her exhale was shaky. "You were eavesdropping?" That word, eavesdropping, nearly made me laugh. "You invited your in-laws to a luxury resort without telling me," I replied. "You let them charge thousands of dollars to my account. They tried to access my room, and you're upset because I overheard you bragging about it?" "They were joking," she said weakly. "You're taking this way too seriously." "No," I said. "I'm taking it exactly as seriously as it deserves." Her tone shifted then, defensive, familiar. "You're acting like we're villains, like we plotted to rob you." "You plotted to use me," I corrected, "and you didn't care how it made me feel." "They needed help," she insisted. "You know what Mom and Dad are like about money. Brandon's parents are proud. They'd never ask outright." "So you decided for them?" I asked. "And for me?" She hesitated. "I thought you'd understand." That sentence, the same one she'd used on the beach, finally snapped something inside me. "Understanding doesn't mean surrendering my boundaries," I said. "You never asked. You assumed. And when I didn't play along, you called me cruel." Her voice rose. "Because you left us stranded. My parents are packing their things under supervision like criminals." "They're facing consequences," I said calmly, "for spending money that wasn't theirs." "You've always been like this," she shot back. "The moment you have power, you pull it away." I closed my eyes. The truth settled heavy and undeniable. This wasn't about the vacation. It was about a story she'd been telling herself for years. That I owed her. That my success was communal property. That my boundaries were negotiable. "I didn't gain power," I said quietly. "I gained clarity." She scoffed. "So that's it? You're cutting me off?" "I'm asking for honesty," I replied. "An apology. Accountability." "You're blowing up my marriage over money," she said bitterly. "No," I answered. "You did that when you chose manipulation over trust." She hung up. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time after the call ended, staring at the white comforter, hands clenched in my lap. There was no satisfaction, only grief. Grief for the sister I thought I had. Grief for the version of us that had existed before money complicated everything. That afternoon, a mutual friend, Vanessa's former college roommate Lydia, texted me. "Hey, I heard what happened. Are you okay?" We met for coffee a few days later, back in Atlanta. She listened quietly as I told her everything. When I finished, she sighed. "You're not the first person they've done this to." My head lifted. "What?" "Gerald and Patricia," she said. "They tried the same thing with Brandon's aunt last Christmas. Aspen, ski trip, forgot their wallets, everyone covered for them." My stomach twisted. "Why didn't anyone stop them?" "They did," Lydia said, "eventually. But your situation was public, too big to ignore." "So Vanessa knew," I murmured. Lydia nodded slowly. She knew. The confirmation hurt more than I expected. Weeks passed. Vanessa left one voicemail, slurred, emotional, accusatory, blaming me for ruining her marriage because Brandon's family had become social pariahs. She hung up before I could respond. I never heard from Gerald or Patricia again. But the silence didn't feel empty. It felt clean. I poured myself back into work, hired 2 new employees, expanded into influencer marketing, took a solo trip to Charleston. No drama, no obligations, no unspoken expectations. One evening, months later, I sat on my balcony watching the Atlanta skyline glow against the twilight. The turquoise bracelet from Seaside rested on my wrist, cool against my skin. I thought about calling Vanessa. Then I remembered her laughter by the pool, Some bridges don't collapse. They reveal that they were never stable to begin with. And sometimes walking away isn't abandonment, it's survival. The strange thing about betrayal is that it doesn't always arrive with chaos. Sometimes it arrives quietly, after the shouting has ended, after the phone calls stop, after you realize the silence isn't temporary. It's permanent, chosen. For weeks after that call with Vanessa, I moved through my days with an unfamiliar steadiness. No constant buzzing from my phone, no emotional landmines disguised as family check-ins. Just space, clean, open space. And in that space, clarity kept unfolding. I replayed the last few years in my mind, not with nostalgia, but with scrutiny. Every favor that hadn't been asked for, every assumption made on my behalf, every time generosity had been treated not as a gift, but as an expectation. I had been useful. That was the role I'd unknowingly accepted. At work, I was thriving. The agency was growing faster than I'd projected. 2 new hires brought fresh energy, fresh ideas. Clients respected my time, my rates, my boundaries. Funny how strangers could do what family couldn't. One afternoon, Savannah, the concierge from Emerald Coast, emailed me. A simple check-in, professional, kind. She mentioned the voucher Thomas had arranged for a future stay. I stared at it for a long time before closing the email. Some places are beautiful, but once they become the setting of betrayal, they lose their shine. A few days later, Lydia called. "You should know," she said carefully. "The story's gotten around." "Whose version?" I asked. She exhaled. "Everyone's." Apparently, once the Destin incident became public, other relatives started talking. Quiet tolerance turned into open acknowledgement. Gerald and Patricia's pattern, free vacations, forgotten wallets, emotional pressure, was no longer a secret. "They're basically unwelcome at most family gatherings now," Lydia said. "And Vanessa, she's been defensive, saying you overreacted." I nodded slowly. "Of course she is." "What hurts her most," Lydia added gently, "is that you didn't chase her. You didn't beg her to understand." I hadn't realized how deliberate that choice was until she said it. I wasn't punishing Vanessa. I was refusing to plead for basic respect. That night, I sat alone in my condo, lights dim, city humming outside my windows. I opened my phone, scrolled to Vanessa's name, and stared at it. I thought about the spare bedroom she'd given me, the way she'd hugged me when I cried over invoices that went unpaid, the version of us that had once felt real. Then I thought about the pool bar, the laughter, the calculation. I typed slowly. "I've spent a lot of time thinking. I'm not angry anymore, but I'm done pretending nothing happened. Until you're ready to acknowledge what you did, without excuses, there's nothing left to talk about." I didn't block her afterward. I didn't need to. She never responded. Weeks turned into months, and something unexpected happened. I stopped waiting. The emotional tension I'd carried for years, always bracing for the next ask, the next obligation, dissolved. I traveled alone. I reconnected with cousins I'd lost touch with. We planned a group trip to Nashville, and when money came up, everyone paid their own way. No assumptions, no pressure, no resentment. It felt revolutionary. One evening, as I dressed for a client dinner, my reflection caught my attention. I looked lighter. Not happier in a dramatic sense, just grounded, like someone who had finally learned where her responsibility ended. I thought about the lesson Destin had taught me. Generosity without boundaries isn't kindness. It's self-erasure. The most difficult line to draw wasn't financial. It was emotional. And once I drew it, everything on the other side became clearer. Who respected me, who valued me, and who only stayed close when I was useful. I slipped the turquoise bracelet onto my wrist before heading out the door. A reminder. Boundaries don't make you cold. They make your warmth intentional. And I had no intention of giving myself away ever again. There are moments in life that don't announce themselves as endings. They don't arrive with slammed doors or dramatic speeches or perfectly timed music. They arrive quietly, like a morning that feels different the moment you open your eyes. For me, that moment had been sunrise in Destin. But I didn't understand what it truly meant until months later, standing barefoot on my balcony in Atlanta, watching the city wake up. I hadn't spoken to Vanessa in nearly half a year. No calls, no texts, no apologies. At first, the silence felt like unfinished business, like a conversation waiting to happen. I replayed imaginary scenarios where she called, finally humbled, finally honest. I imagined what I'd say, how I'd forgive her, but not too quickly, how we'd rebuild something sturdier. But over time, the silence transformed. It stopped feeling empty. It felt resolved. The truth settled in slowly but firmly. If someone is capable of laughing about your exploitation, they are not confused about what they did. They are simply disappointed it stopped working. I learned that lesson not from anger, but from distance. About 8 months after Destin, I received an email from an unfamiliar address. It was from Gerald. The message was long, rambling, and carefully worded. He spoke about misunderstandings, about family dynamics, about how things had gotten blown out of proportion. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of the charges, no mention of the attempted room access, just discomfort at the consequences. I closed the email without responding. That too was a choice. Around that same time, Lydia called me with an update I hadn't asked for. "Vanessa and Brandon are separating," she said quietly. I felt a brief pang. Sadness, not satisfaction. "Is she okay?" I asked. "As okay as someone can be when they refuse to reflect," Lydia replied. "She still thinks you overreacted. She says you chose money over family." I looked out at the skyline, glowing faintly in the dusk. "She chose entitlement over honesty," I said. "I just stopped enabling it." After we hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. Grief is strange like that. It doesn't always come from losing someone completely. Sometimes it comes from realizing the person you miss never truly existed. My life moved forward anyway. The agency expanded again. I hired a third employee. I turned down clients who didn't respect my time. I raised my rates without apology. 6 months after Destin, I took another solo trip, this time to Charleston. No itinerary, no expectations, just quiet mornings, historic streets, and the freedom to choose what I wanted without explaining it to anyone. One afternoon, sitting alone at a cafe, I caught sight of my wrist. The turquoise bracelet. I smiled. I remembered the woman who sold it to me on that beach in Seaside. "You look like someone who just set down something heavy." She'd been right. I hadn't lost a sister. I'd lost a burden disguised as loyalty. Late one evening, nearly a year after the vacation, my phone buzzed with a voicemail notification. "Vanessa." I almost didn't listen. Her voice was unsteady, emotional, but not reflective. She blamed stress, Brandon's parents, the fallout. She said things had spiraled since Destin, that people judged her unfairly, that she wished I'd handled it differently. There was still no apology. She ended the message with, "I don't even recognize you anymore." I sat with that for a long time. Then I whispered to the empty room, "Neither do I." And I meant it as a victory. The woman she didn't recognize was someone who no longer confused sacrifice with love, someone who no longer believed peace required self-erasure, someone who understood that generosity is a gift, not an obligation. I deleted the voicemail, not in anger, in acceptance. That night, I stepped onto my balcony as the city lights flickered on, one by one. I thought about the version of myself who had stood frozen in the shadows near an infinity pool, mojito slipping from her fingers as she overheard laughter meant to stay hidden. That woman thought leaving at sunrise meant running away. She was wrong. Leaving at sunrise meant choosing herself before the damage became permanent. It meant recognizing that boundaries aren't walls. They're doors you decide who gets to walk through. The most expensive lesson I ever paid for wasn't the $6,000 in unauthorized resort charges. It was the realization that blood doesn't guarantee loyalty. Respect does. The turquoise bracelet still sits on my dresser. I wear it on days when old guilt tries to resurface, when conditioning whispers that I owe people access simply because I share history with them. It reminds me that changing course wasn't abandonment. It was alignment. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do for your future is leave quietly at sunrise and never look back.